Thank you very much for having me today. I was looking back on the calendar, and it's been about 2 years since I last spoke at Stennis, which was about the time that I originally came back to MDOT as director. And at that time, we talked about some of the challenges that the commission had tasked me with at trying to address as director of the MDOT. There were things like the relationship that existed at the time between the Department of Transportation and the legislature, and the governor, some of our congressional delegation. We were hemorrhaging staff at the time. We were having funding issues for projects, and those were three of the primary objectives that the commission tasked me with, try to lead our team in a way that would allow us to positively address those challenges and make some type of positive difference. And I believe that as I come back to you now 2 years later, that I can honestly say that we have made progress in what we've done, and I do think that we've addressed these challenges in a positive light. We've tried to have an open line of communication with the legislative leadership, and I believe that is established. We've tried to gain their trust by managing things in a way that gives them confidence in what we're doing, and communicate to them in a way that they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. We've done things from the reduction of our vehicles, the way they're used, making a priority to get money to the projects, which I believe is what the taxpayers believe that they pay the taxes for, backing up any request that we take to the legislature with data, whether that be dealing with our staffing shortages, funding needs, or how our federal program works. And then probably most importantly to the people in the press is trying to create a true transparency with the way that not only we do our business, but the way with which we make our business known to the elected leadership. And that's been from the live streaming of our commission meetings now to the creation of our 3-year plan, which is a snapshot in time of once a year the commission adopts this that tries to illustrate to the legislative leadership and the members where we intend to go with the relationship to the funding in the way of all the various projects and programs that we have to implement. In regard to some of the other challenges that we had, the biggest one that we were facing was our staff. Some of you know that I worked at MDOT a while back when Dick Hall was first appointed commissioner by Governor Fordyce in the late 90s. He saw fit to bring me over to his staff and work with him, and that introduced me to MDOT and their mission and the people that made it up. At that time, we had maintenance forces in all 82 counties. So if you had a hurricane or a tornado or an ice storm like we just had, anytime we got a call from a legislator or a supervisor with a constituent need, whether that be something like a clogged up culvert, to a guardrail that's messed up, or a deer on the side of the road, regardless of the scope, we had crews in all 82 counties that we were able to dispatch out to address that. And over the years, due to salary inequities that happened, MDOT began losing a lot of staff, and it really took a hit in our maintenance forces. And I believe that it took a hit in a way that negatively impacted our ability in carrying out our mission to the taxpayers around, because it stands to reason if you'd get a call and you've got a maintenance crew now that instead of being inside one county was servicing 3 or 4 counties, the time with which they're able to respond to those calls were negatively impacted. And so that was a huge deal that we were faced with. But not just in our maintenance forces, but also in our engineering professional forces. Back in the 1987 4-lane program, when it was passed, most all of the pre-construction work that went into implementing those 4-lane highways and projects that were built all around the state, most of all of that, the surveying, the design, a lot of the work on purchasing the right-of-way, even the inspections of the jobs as they were going on, that we were able to do that internally because we had appropriate staff. But again, due to the salary inequities, we began losing our engineering staff over the years. And with that, our dependency on engineering firms continued to grow. And now we spend about $70 million a year on engineering firms that I believe if we were able to correct the staff salaries, we would be able to build back our engineering staff and deliver that product to the taxpayers at a better price and be able to get more money back to the projects themselves. Luckily for us, SEC Squared, that the State Personnel Board put out, has done a phenomenal job in allowing us to address that. We've stopped the hemorrhaging. We've started rebuilding our maintenance forces. We've started rebuilding our professional engineering force around the state. And I believe that it's going to result in positive things for the state of Mississippi. And the legislative body has saw fit to continue giving us the authority to take full advantage of the SEC Square program, so that's been a positive thing for us. And with regard to funding for projects, the Commission's been able to resurrect our capacity program, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. And that's allowed us to get back into the business of these major construction projects that are meant to add efficiency to our roadways. And with that, the legislature committed one-time money for the construction of a lot of the projects that were coming due this year and this past year, and that's allowed us to carry that out. But looking into the future, we've asked for the ability to modernize how we function as an agency. We are the Mississippi Department of Transportation and not the old Highway Department. To that end, last year in the legislative session, the legislature created a strategic multimodal investment fund that would be administered by MDOT. And the initial appropriation for this was $30 million, with $10 million earmarked for ports and waterways. And the overarching purpose of this fund is to increase the capacity and support the long-term economic growth in the state for our airports, our rails, and our water ports and waterways by leveraging federal dollars. This session, we're also asking for expanded authority in relation to the federal authorized alternative delivery methods. And all this is an extra tool in our toolbox that would allow us, in my opinion, to be able to deliver a product to the taxpayers quicker, more cost effectively, and more efficiently in general, just by simply being able, in those projects where this would qualify, bringing in the construction folks and the design people on the front end, allowing them to work together to forecast what would go on in the project and be able to mitigate risk, which would be able to cut out some of the damages that we normally run into, as well as shorten the life of the project. So hopefully we'll be able to see that come about, which I think will make us more efficient. But our major focus this session, and the main reason that I appreciate the opportunity to be here, is an overall reevaluation of the way the department is funded. It's important to note that while we're a state agency, we implement a federal program. Every 5 years, the Federal Highway Administration is authorized by Congress to conduct business. And all that means is Congress sets out in 5-year increments how much money each state is going to get from the federal government in the implementation of the Federal Highway Administration's programs. And the purpose behind why they do that is because in order to adequately and efficiently run a construction program, you need to be able to forecast years into the future what the funds are going to be like and how to best implement them and how to plan for these projects. Keep in mind that the capacity projects we'll talk about, sometimes the pre-construction phase of that, and going in and getting an environmental document, of doing the surveying, of getting a design done, of purchasing the right-of-way, of moving the utilities, all the things necessary to bring it to construction can take somewhere from 5 to 8 years. And then you let the contractor build it, and then you go through the process of building it over another couple of 3 years. But it's really important that you're able to plan ahead. So that's why Congress does this every 5 years. And with this money, we basically run a reimbursement program of sorts. So what we have at the department is an account that we keep about $150 million in, and that money is kind of like the water in a river. It's not the same today as it was yesterday or will be tomorrow, because we're constantly having money come in and come out in order to carry out and cash flow all the projects that we do. And one of the things I think that's misunderstood by a lot of people is in order to run that federal program and in order to carry out that reimbursement program, we have to spend state dollars up front. And then the officials with the Federal Highway Administration that follow with us as this work's being done, as they can guarantee and they can assure themselves that we're meeting federal standards and that we're following all the guidelines and all the laws and all the things implemented by the federal government in relationship to carrying out our highway system. then they reimburse us the 80 or 90% depending on the money. So the state portion of funds that we have is very critical because we have to use it first in order to take advantage of the federal fund. Our last authorization when this was done, Senator Wicker was the ranking Republican on the Commerce Committee. Thanks to his leadership, this committee is the one that sets what those amounts are. And Mississippi, over the current 5-year authorization, is receiving about $1 billion more than what we got in the last authorization. And what that allowed the commission to do is restart the capacity program. And what the capacity program is, it's the program that MDOT has that is meant to continue adding efficiency to the system. Ideally, what the feds want us to do is to be able to take our traffic projections looking 20 years into the future and to make plans to try to build out a system that is planning for the future rather than reacting with any problems that you have now. Now, unfortunately, back in history, about 12 years ago or so, due to the fact that funding became an issue and the department was falling too far behind in the maintenance and the rehabilitation of our existing system, the commission had to put a moratorium on capacity projects and had to pause the capacity program in order to devote all of that money to the rehabilitation of the existing system that we have. But let me back up a little bit. When we got the extra money from the feds and we were able to restart the capacity program, we were able to start cash flowing, advancing these programs. The legislature came in and they gave us additional money that was one-time money that would be used to pay for the construction of those projects that were going to be ready last year and this year. And everything was looking great. And then inflation hit. And all of a sudden what you saw was we were putting the same amount of money into all of our programs, particularly in the paving program. But the tonnage of asphalt it would buy was going down. So the projects listed in our 3-year plan started diminishing by number every year. The backlog that we have continued to grow more rapidly. And it's important to note that we have metrics that we have to hit in the rehabilitation of our program. Again, we're a state agency, but we implement a federal program. So we have to make sure that we're maintaining our system at least at a rate that the Federal Highway Administration can be comfortable that we're not falling so far behind that they need to come in and take advantage or cause us to make other decisions like has been the case in other items. But right now, with the increased cost of material, with the increased cost in labor, with the increased cost in just carrying out our business, we're very concerned that this capacity program is once again going to be put in danger. And that once again the commission would have to pause that program and divert the funds that are being used in the construction and carrying out and building out of a more efficient system back into maintenance, which would make us a maintenance state all over again. And people may ask why that's a problem. When you go back and you look at what happened after this happened 12 years ago, that's the reason we ended up with places like Highway 49 in Rankin County and Florence and Richland. It's the reason we have situations like on I-55 in DeSoto County where we have traffic congestion. It's the reason you have places like I-20 in Warren County. And it's because the program that was designed to keep our system ahead of the game was no longer functioning because we were having to divert all of our funds into maintenance. So we're hopeful that this session, the big thing that we're asking for is to have a meaningful conversation about how do you want to fund, how do our leaders want to fund our transportation system and take care of this core function of government. Traditionally, most of you know that that's been done in the past by way of the fuel tax. About 2/3 of the fuel tax the state collects is diverted to MDOT. And that's the money in the stream of revenue, by and large, that's used to put up, to draw down the federal dollars and to cash flow our program. But as you have the growth of electric vehicles, the federal government incentivizing that, as we build out a system that would cause people to be able to have greater confidence in being able to get from point A to point B with electric vehicles. That's going to have an impact on fuel tax. As the vehicles we drive now that are fuel operated get better gas mileage than they did in 1987, which was the last time the fuel tax was adjusted. That has an impact. Ever since 2020, you've seen a difference in the workforce. People are working at home a lot more. Traffic's not quite like it used to be, and that's had an impact on the fuel tax. So I'm of the opinion, and I'm very hopeful that we can have a conversation that will look at a more diversified way of funding transportation, and a way to modernize the way that this is done that more easily matches our economy today. And that way we won't be subject to the whims of just one revenue stream the way we are now with the fuel tax. So we've discussed a few ideas with the legislature and trying to provide them with some options that maybe aren't the best ideas, but I thought that they might be something that could at least start the conversation. And so last year we took the Department of Revenue's annual report and looked through it to try to see if there were any streams of revenue that just stood out as viable options to try to accommodate what we're talking about. And the two that jumped out at me were two that the state currently generates, that the obligated portions of which now we have go to infrastructure related functions. And that's the use tax, where the counties and the cities, state aid get percentages of that, and the remaining unobligated portion goes back into the general fund. And then gaming revenue. It was primarily built to add it on to the system back during the time that casinos first came here. Currently, they're being used to pay off highway sinking fund bonds that were issued in recent years for bridges and other things like that. And there's a big unobligated portion of that goes back into the general fund. And so we suggested to them that there is a way to modernize this system, to come up with a diversified way of providing multiple streams of revenue that we think would be more manageable, but collectively could give us the type of revenue we need to still take care of our existing system, but at the same time continue to try to stay ahead of the game and planning for the future rather than reacting to everything. And I'm pleased that we have some legislation out there now that would do some of this. Chairman Briggs Hobson has a bill alive now that would divert portions of the use tax to MDOT. Chairman Jennifer Branning has another bill that deals with both gaming tax revenue and use tax, diverting that fund back to our paving program as well as our capacity program. Chairman Trey Lamar has a bill that would revamp the way the lottery funds are divvied out. And instead of having 80 million come to MDOT, we would get 80%, and the other 20% would still go to the Education Enhancement Fund. Last year, that would have meant an additional 20 to 25 million for MDOT. So these are the type of ideas that I think are helpful, and I've not asked the legislature for any certain amount of money as much as I have just a new model, something that would better allow us to be able to carry out our mission in a way that would let us stay ahead of the game with adding the efficiency to the system, and at the same time not fall behind and continue to grow the backlog of trying to take care and maintain the $66 billion existing investment that the taxpayers have. So I'm hopeful that we'll see continued progress in that way. I don't want to see us create our own storm and then everybody start complaining when it's raining, because I see this cliff coming. And right now, thanks to the additional federal dollars and thanks to the one-time money the legislature has given us this year, we're making it okay. We're behind where we'd like to be, but we're not in dire straits. But you can see, you kind of read the tea leaves, if you will, in what's coming. And so hopefully we'll be able to be successful in having this conversation. Now look, I know that they have a limited or a finite pool of resources. And they've got a lot of important issues to deal with, from PERS to other things. But I do believe that what we do at the Department of Transportation is a core function of government. It's one of the things that the taxpayers expect their government to deliver to them. And our ability to deliver that efficiently and effectively is going to hinge on having the resources with which we can do that. And I believe that we've set things up in a way that hopefully would allow the legislature to have the confidence necessary in making those decisions. But that's pretty much what we have going on, the direction we'd like to go. And in the interest of time, I'm happy to take any questions or attempt to take any questions that you may have.